So the very first thing we need is a starting point. So we're going to go ahead and define 0 degrees, or our starting point, to be in the positive x direction here. Now what you might notice is that these two axes actually create right angles. So each one of these poles here is just 90 degrees apart. And the very last one here, you can see that the location of 0 degrees and 360 degrees is the same. We're going to go ahead and call that coterminal. And that simply means that they finish in the same place or terminate in the same place. You might guess that I've actually already defined my positive direction. The positive direction is going to be counterclockwise. From that, we can determine that the opposite direction, or clockwise, must be the negative direction, meaning that 270 degrees in the positive direction is negative 90 degrees. And then we can continue that count. So now that we've defined a positive and negative direction, let's go ahead and look at an example. For example, if we have an angle, theta equals 120 degrees, well, I know that 0 degrees is just right here. And I know that I'm going to travel in the positive direction. 90 degrees is up here, so it's got to be a little bit past that. Again, I'm starting at 0 degrees here. An angle always has two sides, so this would be called my initial side. And then I'm going to travel along and to about here. That's about 30 degrees past 90, and that's kind of how you're going to have to start counting things. And this side here is called the terminal side. So this would be my angle theta of 120 degrees. And I want to point out that if we then draw a vertical line down from the terminal side, what we've created is a right triangle. And this is going to be the basis of a lot of what we do in trigonometry. And so what we end up with is this little angle right here that is between the terminal side and our x-axis is going to be called the reference angle. And in this case, the reference angle is of course equal to 60 degrees, 180 degrees minus the 120. Now, we'll talk more about what reference angles are later on, but they do end up being pretty important. One last thing, since we're referring to locations, let's go ahead and remind ourselves of the different quadrants we have. From 0 to 90 degrees is our first quadrant. Then we have our second, going in the positive direction. So if you did already know about the names of these quadrants, it might make a little more sense why we counted in this direction. It's the positive angle direction. So we have our first, second, third, and fourth quadrants as another way of describing these locations. So now you know the basics of how to graph an angle. From there, we can build on the fundamentals of trigonometry, which will actually lead us to an entirely new way of graphing points.